They're going to be interconnected.
I think God can do anything he wants with any of these things. Does he want people in relationship? Yes. Does that relationship have to be formal or structured? No. Does he want some people to be in more of a covenantal relationship with another? Yes, we're in a covenantal relationship with another group. We bless each other. We encourage each other. We support each other. The things we do blesses them. They bless us. It's a great relationship. But God said to do it, not because we ought to or because it was the right thing, because he said, and we've had to work through the things in the midst of that, because obviously the enemy doesn't want you in relationship with people. So you end up having to deal with issues to resolve things and move forward. So I wouldn't be concerned about anything that is a formal structure, and just be open to whatever God connects you to, who God connects you to. So is every ecclesia going to be connected to everyone? Well, in the spirit, I suppose they all are. But in practice, it's probably unlikely that there will be every connection. But I think God definitely wants us to connect. And there are some ecclesias who will form a Embassy of Heaven or City of Refuge type environment with others. And they will have a very specific, we have been given authority together in this area to establish something of heaven on earth. And that'll be interesting to see how those things work out, because you then got to work through understanding and differences. And if you're going to work together, there's got to be a degree of, hey, we have a purpose here. It's much easier when you're only having to work with yourself, in a sense, because then you don't have to try and mitigate all those potential minefields of misunderstanding. But when you do, it's great when you work them through. We did. When we entered into this relationship, we didn't know what we were doing. We just did what God said. And later on, some things arose that caused some, not exactly conflict, but confusion and misunderstanding. And it was like, okay, as two benches, let's come and sit together and let's resolve that. And when we resolved that, rather than, okay, this isn't working, we're obviously not there, we resolved it. And then the relationship was strengthened, and the flow between both groups increased once we dealt with the potential blockage. And that benefited us and benefited them, because we helped them to do some things that we are, in a sense, able to do, skilled in certain areas, and they're skilled in other areas, and they've helped us. So, we've benefited from this relationship. And I think if that's the basis of any relationship, is what can I give into this, then you're all going to end up being blessed. If people go into it with what can I get out of this, that's not such a blessing. Will you get something out of it? Absolutely. But not because you're trying to, but because you're wanting to bless. When you bless, you receive blessing. It's multiplied back, But I think there's a lot of relationships out there to be made with people, which will become supportive and beneficial and helpful to go forward. And there are relationships out there that you've got to be careful of. You don't want to make a covenant with the Gibeonites, because you end up being plagued with them for generations. What happened to Israel? They thought they were entering into a thing, but they didn't ask God. They just went ahead because it seemed the right thing to do, and they didn't ask God. And eventually it was like, well, if you'd asked me, I would have told you no. And you wouldn't have had this problem then. You were now being saddled with these people because you've made a covenant with them. You can't break it. So you're saddled with them now for the next, I don't know how many generations, because they're going to demand you keep your end of the deal. So I think whenever you're looking to enter into a relationship, it's making sure that everyone's clear and that there aren't hidden agendas. And I wouldn't rush into those things. But that doesn't mean there aren't very good positive connections to be made. and we're making connections and relationships with people, which, we've broken down some barriers and broken down some difficulties. And now we are connecting with and working together and doing things together in a way we wouldn't done before, because we've established some level of trust, and we're working some of that in practice. And that ultimately, does unity bring a blessing? Yes. You just got to be careful who you're united with, and make sure it's a God relationship and connection, and just not one out of convenience or out of geography or out of anything else, other than, is God calling us to connect and form and have this relationship with this group, and on the basis of what? And so it's great to get to know one another. Then if it goes any further, then you've got to really start to look at, what is this for? What is God's purpose in this? And therefore, are we committed to God's purpose in this? And are we willing to be open and honest and transparent with each other? Are we willing to work through difficulties that come up when you have different points of view or different ways of looking at things? You've got to get those things out. It's the same thing as like establishing a bench. If there isn't openness and honesty, then benches don't really work. If there's a willingness to have that level within any relationship, then those relationships are going to be beneficial. They're going to grow. But not all relationships are. Some of them are one-sided, lopsided. Just got to be careful if you enter into anything, to make sure that you follow a process of working it through together with God. And that might well be, groups of people come together for something in a particular area or city. And that would be great if that's God's intention. Just make sure it is, and with who. That's the key.
So, Mike, if you were getting into something like that, where there's going to be more than one ecclesia, say 3 or 4, you would want to, because you're actually going to have to go into a relationship to do that with them, you would actually want to probably then first find their hearts and establish relationship, build trust. And it's not something you would just walk into and start doing. Okay, this is from God, let's do it. You'd actually, I think what I'm hearing for you, you want to get to know the people that you'd be working with from the other ecclesias and get to trust them.
Yeah, totally.
And it's just not them, it's the other ecclesias too that you'd be working with.
Yeah. See, what we did, we met as benches, and we started to relate. We then brought the 2 groups together to worship together. And then out of that, God did here, I want you to come into agreement with one another. And so we worked that. And then afterwards, we then continued to work that out. I don't think there's a formula for it, but I do think establishing relationship is important. If you're going to do anything together, there's got to be, what is the blueprint for doing that? Do we have a mandate to do it? And what does it look like? Because every group of ecclesias that may have a mandate to do something will look different. So it's not setting up some sort of formulaic franchise, this is how we do things with other ecclesias. It's working it through relationally and seeing, is there a blueprint from God to do this? And what does it look like? What is it for? And that may be very different. It could be a spiritual blueprint that we're coming together to provide a spiritual foundation to bless others in this city. And we're not doing anything which is going to be physical necessarily. We may have a totally spiritual dynamic in this, that we are releasing and calling and doing things spiritually to benefit the city. That's very different from, well, here's 4 ecclesias and we're going to meet once a month and we're going to do this and we're going to do this project together and we're going to do this ministry together. That's a very different thing. So having a clear understanding of what a blueprint is for a gathering of different ecclesias together for a purpose is vital. Otherwise, you have all sorts of potential things you could do, and some of those could be what God wants, and some of them might not be. So establishing what it is that God is doing in that is important. And if those ecclesias are at completely different ends of the theological scale, that will be quite difficult, because some people wouldn't even know what a blueprint was, you know. So you're going to be more likely working with those who have a common, at least an understanding of how you engage heaven and how you do things from a heavenly perspective. Otherwise, it will be so difficult. It's like we have local churches, we're part of churches together, but we're actually less and less involved in the things that they do, simply because it's just completely off our radar now. You know, we don't have prayer meetings. We don't have the usual type of things. When there's something that we can come together, let's say for a worship gathering, like we have a Pentecost festival where we come together and we worship on a Sunday together, great. We'll join in with that. We'll be part of that. But if it's to do other things, our guys wouldn't even know what a prayer meeting was. Some of the newer people. So to come in a room where people sort of asking God to do things, they will be like a fish out of water. And we wouldn't want to, in a sense, create a conflict or confrontation by doing something that other people aren't familiar with. So, you know, if some of our guys went in there and they said, well, let's go into the courts of heaven and let's do this, and we're going to go and do this and decree this from the heavenly realms, the other people would be like, what are they on about? So we don't get involved with those things, because it would be counterproductive. Because we're not there to convince people that what we're doing is right. We're just doing what we're called to do. And we are happy for them to do what they're called to do. And if their call changes over time and they discover new things, and then they share those new things and we have a common way of doing something together, that's very different. And I think you have to, you know, we made that decision when we had discussion with those groups, and those groups rejected engaging heaven. So it's no point trying to, and we're not trying to convince them that that's the right way. It's just the way we're doing it. So we don't get involved in those type of things because they would be foreign and alien to us. And what we did would be alien to them. And we don't feel we've got any mandate to do it. So we don't. But the things that we can have common ground on, we will. You know, we'll do a walk of witness on Easter Sunday, Good Friday or something, and we'll do things that we are able to connect with, and other things we just won't, because they're just not where we are, you know, and it's not where they are, so it's no point trying to do something. So we made a decision to do that a while ago, and you know, I don't know where they're coming from on that, whether they look at us and think, oh, they're all isolated and don't want to get involved in things or not. I don't know. You know, I've got enough relationship with them for people to ask if they've got an issue, you know. But if you are going to do things with a group in some sort of blueprint way, then it's really important to clarify what that blueprint is. You know, why is God calling us together?
And Mike, I think this is obvious, but I think what you're all saying, while that person might have a mandate, we should be able to go up as a venture in Ekklesia and to get that blueprint for that mandate if we're supposed to be part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
we're not doing someone else's mandate, we're doing the mandate God gave us.
Yes. Everyone needs to fulfill their own mandate and blueprint before God. That's what you're responsible for. But there may be a bigger blueprint that's something which is a regional thing. See, I'm part of a regional bench that has a regional blueprint to help establish heavenly government in our region. And 3 of us who are on that bench each have individual mandates in the places that we are operating in. So we all get on and do that. But then we'll come together like we did this weekend, and we'll put on something which is a corporate thing to equip our area or our region in heavenly governmental things. We're not going to establish a central, here's our venture 3 thing we do on the ground. We're just doing the things that God says, and we get on and do our individual things, and we're in relationship, so we're all benefiting from the fact that we're doing something regionally to bless things in the region. But we're not developing a regional center where we will then all do this. That's not our blueprint. Our blueprint is to do things in the heavens and then do things to help establish things on the earth, which we're not establishing, we're helping others to. But we have established our own, and we're out working our own blueprint. So it's important, if you are going to get together with another group or other groups, is to actually clarify what is the purpose that God has brought you together, and what is the blueprint for that. And then you then are all clear why you're doing what you're doing, not just to have assumptions. If it's purely God wants you to relate for others for mutual support and encouragement, awesome. That's it. That's the blueprint. We'll come together now and again, and we'll share with each other, and we'll encourage each other, and that will be it. If it's no, we have been given a mandate to do something more than that, then you really need to know what that is, and then be in agreement. And then you have to work out what's the best vehicle for doing that. Because if you're going to start doing something together, and that involves actually practically building something, doing something, then you have to work out under whose governance are you doing that? Whose public liability insurance are you using? Or do you actually, because if you don't, then you run into legal issues. You know, it's like, oh, we're going to do a joint conference. Well, who's responsible? Under what are you doing that? Okay, well, if we're going to set up something else that we're all going to be part of, and we're going to use that vehicle. So for locally, we have a Churches Together group. And that Churches Together group has its own bank account and its own constitution and its own purpose. And we're all part of it, and we contribute to it. And that is the vehicle we do things in a united way under. Now, sometimes different groups will take different roles and different functions within that, but there is a governance structure that we have formed to help facilitate doing things together. You know, it may be at its lowest common denominator, but it has been blessed, and it's produced things and done things, and it's been good. And I think it's a positive thing. But if you're going to be more strategic, legislative, governmental in coming together, then probably you have to find out, well, what is this going to be? And if you were to establish an embassy of heaven with 4 or 5 different ecclesias, then you're going to have some legal government or thing that works. Otherwise, you're going to be setting up an embassy of heaven, you know, that would eventually could have all sorts of governmental things, heavenly governmental things, and therefore having a clarity about that will be really important. Going forward, it would, yeah.
Can you share a bit how an embassy in heaven would work?
Well, again, depending on what the blueprint is for it, for me, it would be establishing heaven on earth. It would be fulfilling whatever that mandate was in that particular area or region or city. It would be the place where you were operating under heaven's government on earth and not earthly government, and you would therefore be getting ready for when all the earthly stuff starts to fall apart, and there you are demonstrating this is what it is to live in health, this is what it is to live under heaven's government, this is what it is to have supernatural authority here to establish this. It could actually become a city, a place, a physical place where people come in and they're safe and secure from what's going on outside. and therefore it may need a power generating thing, a water generating thing, a food generating thing. It may need its own farms. It may need supernatural food production. It may need finance that comes in different ways. It may be bartering using something other than money, because if the money system fails. So it could be it could run like a city. And if you're going to run it like a city, you're going to imagine all the different ways a city works, and but that would be in maybe a larger setting. We have a blueprint for that here, and what we're looking to do on a smaller scale will then be replicated like a fractal picture. So what we've learned to do as an ecclesia, that's a small image of what a bigger thing might look like. And our, say, mountains as an ecclesia would connect to the mountains of the larger thing, because they would have a different agenda. If you're going to have, if you're running a city, if you're, where you're all actually living in an environment which actually is an outworking of heaven, that's going to be very different. And you may need to have ground, and you may need to sell all your properties and buy ground. I mean, who knows? I mean, this is where the rubber hits the road. This is what they were obviously prepared to do in the early church. And it was like, you may live in a commune. Who knows? I'm not saying there's any pattern. It could be any of those. It could be anything. And it could be nothing like that at all. And it could be just people who are in an area, all individually operating under heaven's government, and all individually outworking something in their own lives and in their own homes, in their own families, which reflects the common authority that they have. Again, there is no set formula for any of this. It's what is the blueprint say for this group in this place.
So, Mike, in your own, where you are, where there is an embassy in heaven, how is the government set up here on earth to operate that? Like in your own case, maybe, or just how would you see it going? Because you always have to have a government set up to administer, right?
Yeah. Well, we know that we have a mandate to be part of an embassy of heaven here. If that's with others, great. If others aren't interested and don't want to be involved, then we'll do it on our own. But we would like to do it with other people and other groups. At this point in time, I can look around and think that doesn't look very likely. There's only one other group, I would say, that we are connected with relationally who would potentially be involved in that. But things can change, So we're preparing for all eventualities. Our mandate is to establish heavenly government, in one, that's part of what we're called to do. Therefore, we would probably take a lead in that, because other people wouldn't have a clue what we were on about. But if others got to a point where they were engaging heaven and they were also receiving mandates and blueprints and things, then it would be easy coming together to establish how are we going to do this on a larger scale. But I think, personally, the identity of the individual ecclesias would probably dissolve into we are now corporately a embassy of heaven. Because while you're maintaining individuality, you are not seeing yourself as part of a whole, and I'm not saying that it could be set up on a regional basis or different regional things, how they work. But ultimately, we want the identity to be, this is God's heavenly thing on earth. This is the government of God on earth. And therefore, what would there need to be a separation? I think ultimately, unity being one, people would realize, well, what's the point of having a separate identity when we're actually here representing God for this city or for whatever. But that's not to say that it couldn't maintain a sort of distinctiveness in some way. I think it could, There would be definitely a departmentalization of what needed to be done. And again, you could have one ecclesia operating the power, the food, and the water, or you could have groups from each ecclesia coming together to do that as a corporate thing. Any of those things are possible. You know, you may have groups that are experts in certain areas and others that are and therefore they get on and they're reflecting that within the overall. Or you could have it completely differently. We have representatives here. For instance, it's like in the local churches, we've always recognized that what any individual group does is done on behalf of the whole. So our ministry into the poor and our working with addictions and working in those areas is a reflection of the desire of the whole to do that. But we do it on their behalf, and they don't interfere in how we do it, but they recognize that we're doing that. There will be pointless setting up something else to do that. The same goes with working with older people. We don't necessarily do that, but other groups do. Some people work with youth and their main function is working with young people or youth. Well, we don't do that. So we see them doing that and we bless them and honor them for doing it. And if we had any people here who felt a call to youth work, we probably wouldn't set up a youth ministry. We would send them over to those who are already doing it to help them. As the other churches send volunteers to us who want to help in the area we're doing. So a lot of our kitchen is managed, you know, so we got a manager who manages the kitchen, but actually all the people who are doing it are volunteers. And most of them have come from other churches because they want to do that type of ministry. And it would be pointless each individual church setting up their own one of those. So we do have a bigger picture here, which we've worked out over the years to recognize. And although it's not a formal thing, and they certainly wouldn't see it as a Embassy of Heaven or a City of Refuge or something, it's a sort of a picture of what could take place. You know, and when you look at these things, if you look at it from a normalcy perspective, you'll only see what's possible out of what has always been. But we've got to look at it. This could be totally different than anything that's ever been seen. So it would be difficult to define something that's never been seen before. So we've got to be careful that we don't look at it and try and make it fit into what we already know how to do, when it could be going way beyond that. Because if we're operating in a higher level of governmental authority, let's say we were out working the power within, there's no sickness in heaven on earth, and we had no sickness, we had no need for doctors, hospitals, anything like that. We lived in health, and everyone outside of that didn't live in health. Well, I guarantee you'd have a queue of people wanting to find out how you were living in health. You know, and if there came some sort of plague or something that all of a sudden everyone wasn't living in health and you were, they would want to be getting in on it. You know, so there will be ways of modeling something which is a totally different system rather than the earthly system we've got. The same would be financially, the same would be in food production, the same might be in lots of different areas, like even how we're going to build and establish something. Are we going to use bricks and mortar, or are we going to use the creative power of our minds to create something? So it's, hey, we need this. Well, we will then call this into being and see it manifest. So are we going to have money? Let's say there is no money anymore. Okay, well then, if there's no money, then there's no need for any sense of performance that earns you more money than other people. So there will be an equality about, well, there's no money. We're not doing this for money. We're doing this to demonstrate God's kingdom on earth. We don't need money because someone's providing the food, someone's providing the water, someone's looking after the power system, someone's doing this, someone's doing that. I do whatever I'm called to do. Others do what they're called to do. And, you know, it's a bit like the Star Trek world. There was no money in the Star Trek world. They weren't serving Starfleet for their wages. They were serving Starfleet at a vision. And they had all the food they needed. They had all the clothes they needed. They could replicate anything they needed. And they didn't need to buy it. So in the future, under this heavenly perspective, the way we do things now may be very different in that. Within that confine, outside of it, they may do it very differently, you know, because they're not functioning under the same government. So they're still operating the DIY path, you know. So we've got to make sure we don't build an Embassy of Heaven using DIY methods, you know, because we're not there to build a name for ourselves. That was Babel, you know. Let's build a name, makes a city to build a name for ourselves, because we might be lost, you know, we might be separated. Well, yes, you ended up separated because you did it for the wrong reason under the wrong motive. So there may be very, very different things, how these things function, than what we're presently seeing. And therefore, it's quite difficult to define what one might look like, other than principles that we are living under heaven's government. We have the everlasting doors of heaven open. We got the river of life flowing into our environment. We can expect fruitfulness and blessing. So if there's there is a famine and nothing's growing, it wouldn't be like that for us, because we're living under a completely different system where we have a mandate to be fruitful, to multiply, to fill, to subdue, and to rule. That's our sonship mandate. And we want to establish gardens on the earth again, if you want to put it like that. Places of bounty and blessing, of fruitfulness, and an awesome place to live. And then expand that to fill the earth with it. Because it's going to be back to restoration. You know, Embassies of Heaven are here to restore earth back to its original intention and purpose by operating as Adam and Eve should have operated, in heaven and on earth, flowing from both realms and outworking things in that way. So if we need water, well, yes, we could create water, or we could open up an aquifer of the deep, because we know there's aquifers in the deep, and we know in the past they've opened up, and we could open one. You know, so there's sort of a completely different way of thinking about it, which is quite difficult to imagine when you're living in the normal worldly system, if you like. But we're trying to actually learn how to operate in this way as a small foundation of heaven on the earth, which will expand and increase in probably many different ways. But each place may look totally different. You know, I mean, if I was going to build a city, a physical location where with places for people to live and everything like that, and I was to do it out of my imagination using, let's say, the substance of heaven to manifest physical substance on the earth, mine would look very different from yours, I would imagine, because I would probably come out of some imaginative thing which probably would shape things very different than other people would. And if it was like, hey, there is no boundaries or restrictions here of what you can establish and what it looks like and what it will be, I would have some very creative ideas about how things might look. Because I think about things like that, and others would have very different views. So even the physical form of something and how it might be built would be very different in each situation because of our individual creativity and our desire for things, you know, and if you're building something in Death Valley in California as opposed to Toronto, it's probably going to have a slightly different element to how it's built. You know, you're not going to have too much snow down there, so you're not probably going to have to need too much heating system, or how you keep everything warm. It's probably going to be the opposite. How do you cool everything down? So, you know, how would you do that? You could have a dome of protection that produced a climate which was perfectly temperate, even within a desert or even within permafrost area, because we're not subject to the physical limitations of Earth when we're creating something out of heaven. So I don't know, someone could build something under the sea. You know, let's redo Atlantis. There's all sorts of things which, once you start letting your creative juices begin to flow, all of a sudden there's numerous possibilities and potentials. But we've got to start building the foundation that would operate in a 3 and 7 and 12 or whatever, as would then operate in a larger thing. It's just a fractal. Everything functions governmentally and from God's perspective as fractal images. The bigger picture looks like this, and that bigger picture is made up of multitudes of little pictures, and those are all made up of multitudes of little pictures. So one Ekklesia could be one fractal image, and then that then would become, this looks like the same thing, but it's much, much bigger and has much, much more in it, but essentially the same principles are there. We still have benches of 3. We still have mountain positions of authority. Whether that mountain is, rather than for us a blessing mountain, it's now the kingdom bank, or whether it's the health mountain, now it's the health community, it's just an expansion of what's going on governmentally within something small to in something big. It's just, you now have a power mountain, an energy mountain, if you like, as one of the mountains that needs to keep a city going. You can have the food mountain. The things that you have will probably be different, but they're still based on the fact that they're spheres of government. And, I think when you look back and after you remember the transformation videos that they had out years ago, you saw some glimpses of what they were saying. In this community had carrots which were 4 feet long, and they had a fruit that grew, and you see the promised land, it's flowing with milk and honey, and there are fruits the size of footballs. Everything was awesome in its fruitfulness rather than the limited fruitfulness. And of course mankind has tried to do that with the DIY method in GM crops and mixing things to produce something bigger, whatever. Well, we'll be able to do that in a spiritual authority sense by producing an environment which is going to be like heaven on earth. And therefore, there is going to be no restrictions of disease or crop diseases or pests. A place where we're going to eradicate all pests. There won't be any. Because we're living under a different thing. There's no rats running around in heaven, chewing things up. You just don't have it. There are no mosquitoes up there giving you diseases. Those sorts of things will not be in an Embassy of Heaven environment, because we are going to bring heaven's environment here and function out of it. But it's fun. It's a fun way of, hey, let's begin to blue sky and begin to just get ourselves out of what is normal and what is looking at what has always been to what could be. What would the garden that was, connected to Eden look like now if it hadn't have messed up and they hadn't been excluded from it? Would it have been filled with cities? What would it have been? Because it's like, as population increased, what would it be like? They estimate at the time of the flood, there were 35 billion people on the earth. Where were they living? Now, when you read some of the story and Enoch and whatever and all that stuff, you see that they stripped the resources of the planet because they were consuming everything, because they were not coming out of the purpose of God to be fruitful and to multiply and fill. They were looking to strip everything. And that's why the flood came, to stop that, ultimately bringing full restoration to what God wanted. You know, and then they tried to do something similar with Babel, and it's like, well, no, you're not getting away with that either. You know, this isn't, you're not going to, you know, produce that wrong structure on the earth ultimately, so that the right one won't be able to be fulfilled. So we're in a, you know, a place of maybe the beginning of learning and thinking about these things. But if we don't start thinking about it now, when we need to do something, we'll be like panicking because we haven't got a clue what to do. So I think about these things, you know, and it's just like, then you go a step beyond. You have the Joshua generation, and we're operating in Embassies of Heaven. What about the Joshua nation? Because we're supposed to disciple nations. You know, it wasn't make disciples of nations, it was disciple nations. You know, then you have, and it talks about, you know, the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of Jesus. So are all the nations going to end up becoming one? Yes, if everything's going to be restored, because that's how they started out in God's intention. God wanted family, not nations all separating and arguing and fighting over territory and everything else. Family. God blessed Abraham to be a blessing to every family of the earth, not every nation that we've set up in our own images to maintain our position and bit of territory and to keep it and keep people out. You know, that's the DIY version of God's desire. God wants family. He wants relationship. He wants us to restore back to what it would have been. So a lot of change is going to take place. Ultimately, the planet itself is fragmented. It was never like that in the beginning. There was one landmass. It has become separated and fragmented. And if it's going to be restored, it's going to be restored back to one landmass. Because everything is going to be restored to God's original purpose. Think, well, how can that happen? Well, I guess the same way as it happened when it drifted apart. You know, did it drift apart or was it separated? Yeah. God can bring it all back together again, and so can we. You know, because as we begin to see the power of our consciousness, we can begin to choose realities that actually reflect heaven and can do things like that. Now, is that in this age? Is that in the ages to come? I don't know. But I know it's God's intention to restore everything back to his original purpose and intention. So it ain't going to stay as it is like this forever, because heaven and earth are going to be brought back into alignment, into their original, completely unified position, not separated from how it is now. So the spiritual realms and the physical realms are going to be restored in relationship. So yeah, a lot of stuff really there.
Mike, I just want to ask you a question. You'll treat addicts. You'll have an addict treatment center. Now, a lot of people who take antidepressants exhibit bizarre behavior. And the only way out of it is, I suspect, because somehow the antidepressants affect your soul gates. And the only way out is actually to wean yourself away from antidepressants. But now that's become another addiction. So can you sort of enlighten us how you'll go about it and what steps you'll take actually to wean them out?
I think having an addiction to something which is either illegal or socially unacceptable, you know, working through those things, the basic premise is the same. People are using substances to try and control their pain, brokenness, fragmentation, that sort of thing. So mental health is a huge issue, and we need to see as many breakthroughs in mental health as we do in physical health. So when we're looking at health in the perspective of Jesus came to bring us wholeness, that is spirit, soul, body, and therefore mental health is a part of that. So yes, we can probably look at it as dealing with the plague of, pharmaceuticals that are being released. And I think there's a transition period in which what we will have in terms of living in health without the need for anything, God is giving us substitutes, things that he has created that we can use to bring a restoration of balance. And that would be, fragrant oils and essential oils and different things like that. And I think there are a lot of people now who are looking at frequency and fragrance and light and sound and different therapeutic ways of bringing people's lives back into wholeness and balance, which I don't think we'll need in the end, but I think we need now, because we've got to bring people out of their dependence on whatever they're in into something else. And therefore, a lot of essential oils cross the brain blood barrier and get straight into the limbic systems and can release trauma and pain and be part of that process really easily. So I think there are things that we are having revelation of which are part of that, but ultimately you have to deal with the underlying reasons. Why are people depressed? Because they don't have a personal, intimate relationship with God and a revelation of their identity and their purpose in life. So if we can bring people back to a restored identity and destiny, a lot of depression will just cease to exist. People won't have even a concern about those type of depressed things. Now, some of them are caused by trauma and they're caused by other things. Well, obviously you have to deal with the root causes of them. But some of it is just a society is without focus and without identity. And if we start demonstrating what it is to have an identity in God, then I think that will change people's mental health, a lot. But God has given us a lot of tools, which we are beginning to use and beginning to deal with some of these issues. A lot of issues of health, whether mental or physical, result in unforgiveness from unforgiveness. So we're developing forgiveness therapy. The group I was talking to earlier that we're in covenant relationship, they developed forgiveness therapy. We're now using it. And that's designed for people in the world, not in the church. And so people are being free from their mental health issues associated with resentment, bitterness, unforgiveness, and discovering the light, the source of that freedom, which is God, Jesus. So yeah, that is a small answer. I haven't really got time to go into it any deeper, but they can pick it up again at another time. I have to leave it there.
Going to the courts